Have you ever found yourself snapping at your kids before breakfast even hits the table? Feeling overstimulated before the day's even really begun? You wake up exhausted, rush through your day in survival mode, and then collapse into bed, only to do it all over again tomorrow. And worst of all, you don't even recognize the woman, mother, and wife you've become. I used to live in that cycle. I used to spend my homemaking days having frequent outbursts of anger, always crying, overstimulated from the second I woke up until I collapsed in my bed at night. But to escape this constant state of survival, I didn't just detox from social media or declutter my home or change my diet or overhaul my homemaking routine. No, I needed something so much more transformative than that. I literally rewired my brain to escape survival mode, and it changed everything. So if you're new here, I'm Curie, and I help Christian homemakers who are living in a fog of exhaustion and stress to become the patient, peaceful mother and wife they've always dreamt of being. So I would love for you to subscribe to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to walk you through 4 habits that helped me heal my overactive nervous system, also known as limbic system dysfunction. For each habit, I'll show you exactly how I implemented it in my daily life so that you can start making these changes too. And then stay until the end because I'm going to tell you the exact transformation that I felt within less than a month of making these changes. But before we dive in, I need to tell you something. I thought I was a lost cause. And even if I wasn't, I assumed it would take years of work to get better. But in the Lord's infinite mercy, I felt drastically different in less than a week. And even my husband noticed a big difference. If you're struggling with feeling overwhelmed, overstimulated, or reactive in your home, if you want to learn how to regulate your nervous system like I did and rewire your brain so that you can show up as the calm, joyful homemaker that I know you want to be, I invite you to join my free workshop where I share my 5-step framework that I used to get out of survival mode and find true joy and peace in my homemaking. The link for that is below. And if you sign up today, you'll get a free workbook to follow along with the workshop. So habit number 1 is I created more margin in my day and I just started doing less. I know that slowing down feels impossible when you're drowning in responsibilities, but what if the constant rush is actually what's keeping you trapped? I used to live in a state of constant rushing, hurrying, worrying, rushing from one task to the next, convinced that if I could just get everything done, I'd finally feel at peace. But peace never came. No matter how much I accomplished, the weight on my shoulders never lifted. So I started planning less on purpose. Yes, that meant that I accomplished less too, but it also meant that my nervous system could finally breathe. I began to move more slowly, intentionally, telling my brain, there's no rush, there's no need to panic. Even if everything doesn't get done today, it's going to be okay. And I just put it in the Lord's hands. But doing less wasn't enough. I also had to take control of my thought life because the frantic pace of my body was just a reflection of the chaos that was in my mind. So habit number 2 is that I began to really renew my mind. You've probably heard that renewing your mind is important, but are you actually doing it? I thought I was. I read my Bible, I prayed, I listened to Christian podcasts, but my thoughts were still spiraling out of control, and more often than not, were filled with stress, fear, and frustration. Renewing my mind required real work. I made Bible and prayer time my priority, yes, but I also started actively replacing negative thoughts with the biblical truth that I learned during my Bible time. So instead of letting my thoughts run wild, I would disrupt them and ask, what would God think about this? Then I would replace that thought with truth. Guys, can you imagine how much work this is on any given day when most of your thoughts are destructive? So it would go something like this. Let's say I had a thought like, my kids are being so annoying, they're not letting me get anything done. I would disrupt that thought and replace it with something like, actually, my kids are giving me an opportunity to disciple them, and that is my top priority. The key here is that you can't just remove negative thoughts. You have to replace them with the truth that's found in God's word. But even as I trained my thoughts, I knew my body needed something more. Small, intentional moments of actual rest throughout my day. So, habit number 3 that I implemented was that I weaved pockets of regulation throughout my day. You know that feeling of going through your day, just zooming around the house, just trying to get everything done and take care of the children, that you totally forget to meet your own basic needs, let alone anything that actually helps you rest? I used to believe that rest was something that I had to earn. But the more that I ignored my body's need for rest, the more my nervous system screamed at me through symptoms like anxiety, chronic fatigue, and debilitating overstimulation. So I started weaving small moments of regulation throughout my day. Sometimes this looked like just stepping outside to breathe fresh air, sitting in stillness, and enjoying the presence of God. Sometimes it meant doing something a little more elaborate. The bottom line is I started prioritizing self-care not as a luxury, but as a necessity to calm my nervous system and tell my brain, you're safe, you can rest. The fourth habit is that I stopped focusing so much on the pain that I was experiencing. Dwelling on your struggles might feel like you're processing whatever's going on with you, but what if it's actually training your brain to stay stuck in those very struggles, making everything feel harder and heavier and more overwhelming? When I was at my worst, I obsessed over my symptoms, my fatigue, overstimulation, triggers, irritability, and all the symptoms associated with nervous system dysfunction. The more I focused on how bad I felt, the worse I seemed to get. And then the angrier and more reactive I became because of it. I had to train my brain to stop dwelling on the problems and start looking for solutions. Instead of spiraling with thoughts like, oh, how long is this going to last? Last time this happened to me, it lasted for weeks. I began shifting my focus to the progress that I was making, no matter how small. And in doing so, I gave my brain space to heal. It's like I finally allowed my body to heal. As I made these changes, my entire life transformed. So, here are some of the changes that I experienced within 1 month of rewiring my brain using some of the methods that I teach in my free workshop and in my course. My body relaxed in areas that I didn't realize I was even holding tension. I had been so tense for so long that I had forgotten what it felt like to actually be relaxed. And once I felt that release, I realized how much unnecessary tension I had been carrying. I became less aggressive and combative, and my overall demeanor became more approachable and just peaceful. My movements became naturally slower and more intentional. I used to rush around frantically through the house, thinking that I had to move that fast because of everything that I needed to get done. But I realized my body had been stuck in fight or flight mode. And as my nervous system healed, my movements became calm and unrushed. I became more relaxed and joyful in general. I started experiencing true joy again, something I honestly hadn't felt in a long time, which is really sad. I found more joy in my children. I began noticing all the sweet little things that they did and just truly experiencing them as the blessings they are. I was able to actually delight in my children, which I don't even think I knew what that meant before. I became less anxious over small things, and I had so much more energy. I went from needing to nap during my kids' nap time to feeling energized and productive, and I started using that time for hobbies and projects that brought me joy. So instead of waking up groggy and having to jump right back into the day, I actually felt refreshed after nap time because I got to do something that was soul-giving and exciting for me. My natural tendency shifted from negativity to positivity. Even when something difficult happened, my brain immediately looked for the good in it, just naturally, without even me trying. My days stopped feeling like drudgery. I remember months before, I was at my lowest point and I was texting a friend saying it felt like I was wading through mud just to get through the day. And this wasn't just a short season, right? Everyone has seasons like that where it just feels like you're trudging through mud just to get through the day. We're talking years of progressively getting worse and worse. And I just noticed the trajectory was going in the wrong way. So I remember talking to my mentor and telling her how much I hated my role as a mother and how I felt duped by the whole gig as mom, homemaker, everything. Just everything was so hard. I always wanted to be a mother, but I felt duped. I was just angry about how hard everything was. And now I realize that it was never meant to be that hard. Yes, motherhood is, of course, hard, and there are some seasons where it just totally drops us to our knees, but not for an extended period of time like I had experienced. It shouldn't be like that. My husband was even noticing. He said that I seemed normal again, like I wasn't always freaking out. And since he was noticing such a change, he was so supportive of what I was doing. He would happily give me my quiet time alone, and he would take the kids so that I could go do what I needed to do. Not that he didn't do that before, because I am so blessed to have such an involved husband, but he was gladly giving me this time. And honestly, he was almost more protective of this time than I was, which goes to show how much it was affecting him too. I could drink coffee again. My body had not been tolerating coffee, and it was totally messing up my hormones and my blood sugar and my nervous system. And it was so sad because I love coffee. But I was now able to drink it again without it affecting my mood or my nervous system or just making me feel jittery. And that's one of the things about what I teach in my workshop and my course is when you heal your nervous system, you're able to start eating and drinking the things that you previously weren't able to because your body can finally tolerate them. It just gives you more food freedom in general, which is amazing. My hair started growing back at an astonishing rate. I was losing hair by the droves, and now I could actually run my fingers through my hair and pull out one, maybe two hairs. But before, if I did that, I would pull out literal clumps of hair. I also noticed that if someone snapped at me or was rude in any way or wronged me in some way, I didn't have this gut reaction to just fire right back. And I noticed my resiliency increasing. I was able to bounce back more quickly if something bad had happened. Whereas before, something like dropping a smoothie on the floor would have totally broken me and I would have just lost my mind. And yeah, as irritating as something like that can be, we should be able to bounce back from something like that fairly quickly without it ruining our whole day or making us spiral. If I had a day where I was feeling symptomatic in some way, I was actually able to maintain my joy despite that discomfort. Also, things just weren't annoying me as much. I was constantly annoyed before. Everything, all the time, just annoyed constantly. But that lessened so much. I found myself being more articulate and clear headed. I had so much brain fog before, and it felt like I had lost who I was. Before, I used to be very intelligent and articulate, but I had just totally lost that. And so that started coming back, which is great. I noticed that I had higher highs and lower lows, meaning my good days were even better than my good days before, and my bad days just weren't as bad as the bad days that I had before. Again, that goes back to the resiliency. I was just able to bounce back. I was less judgmental of people, even just strangers on the road. I had so much more empathy and I started seeing the good in people. Something else that I noticed is that I wasn't as sensitive to touch or pain. I used to be so very sensitive. And with young toddlers, that's tough because they're constantly jumping on you or accidentally hurting you because they just don't have good body awareness. And homemaking can honestly be a really dangerous job. So I wasn't as fragile of a mommy. I was actually able to be rough and tumble with my children, not only because I had more energy, but because I was less fragile and overstimulated. I was also less hypervigilant. Of course, I'm a mom, so I'm always vigilant, but I wasn't hypervigilant. And if you experience chronic stress, you may be aware of how exhausting it can be to go throughout your day constantly being on guard. So that lessened quite a bit very early on. I had actually decided to wake my children up early from bed one morning so that we could go on an early morning walk as a family. And you guys, this never would have happened before. I never would have sacrificed rest time to wake the kids up early because I was in such a survival mode that I needed every single second of them being asleep. I noticed myself clenching my jaw less and grinding my teeth less at night. I was getting less infections. One of my symptoms of nervous system dysfunction is that I would have frequent infections of all kinds and all over my body. At several points, I had had multiple infections at the same time. And so that was a real issue, and that just resolved. And most importantly, I was finally free from the cycle of overstimulation and anger that had defined my days for so long. Do I get angry now? Yes. Do I snap at my kids now? Of course. But it's so much easier for me to confess that, repent, and bounce back to the joyful, happy mother that I've always wanted to be. So if you resonate with anything I said in this video, I want you to know that you don't have to live in survival mode anymore. The Lord is more than able to renew your mind, heal your nervous system, and restore your joy just like He did for me. So if you want to learn exactly how I made this transformation and how you can find joy again in your own homemaking, I would love for you to join me in that free workshop. The link for that is below. So if you think this video would be a blessing to another homemaker who you know, I would love for you to share it with somebody today. It was such a joy to have you here. And if you're interested in how I made a dopamine menu to focus on resting without scrolling, click to this next video.